You drove past one of his hotels this morning. Maybe you caught a concert at a venue his company runs, Crypto.com Arena in Los Angeles, the O2 in London, Coachella out in the California desert. Your kids may have watched a movie his studio financed. If you've ever sat in a dark theater inside a Regal Cinema, and there are roughly 7,000 of those screens across this country, you were sitting inside his building. You just have no idea who he is. His name is not on the front door. He doesn't post on social media. He hasn't given a real press conference in over 2 decades. He drives himself to work. He wears jeans and a Timex watch. When he shows up at sporting events, he personally owns, which he does regularly. The people around him have no idea who he is. For decades, colleagues in the business world called him the anti-Trump. Where others needed the spotlight, this man built his entire empire specifically in the shadow of it. As of early 2026, Bloomberg estimates his net worth at approximately $24.8 billion. Forbes puts it at $19.4 billion. Either way, you are looking at a fortune larger than the GDP of Iceland. This one man, this quiet, reclusive, deeply private billionaire from Denver, controls more wealth than most nations on Earth, and the vast majority of Americans cannot pick him out of a lineup. His name is Philip Anschutz, and this is the story of the dynasty hidden behind the Rocky Mountains. When most people think about Colorado money, they picture ski resorts and tech startups, Aspen real estate, craft breweries, maybe some natural gas out near Rifle. They don't think about oil empires that stretch across 9 million acres. They don't think about a man who bought an entire railroad for $90 million and sold it 12 years later for over $5 billion. They don't think about a family that has been quietly accumulating power in this state since 1958, when Philip Anschutz's father, Fred, planted a flag in the Rocky Mountain West and started digging. To understand where this dynasty stands today, you have to go back to where it began. Not in a boardroom, not at a bank. In the mud and cold of a Kansas oil field, with a father who made and lost fortunes multiple times over, and a son who was watching every move he made. Fred Anschutz was a wildcatter, the old term for an independent oil man who drills exploratory wells in unproven territory. The guys who bet everything on a hunch, a geological survey, or a rumor about what might be sitting beneath the dirt. Fred founded the Anschutz Corporation in 1958, incorporated in Denver. His health deteriorated in the early 1960s, and he passed the reins to his son Philip, who was, at that exact moment, days away from starting law school at the University of Virginia. Philip Anschutz was 22 years old. He walked away from law school without hesitation and took over his father's struggling drilling operation. He later described that decision as the defining moment of his entire career. Not the billion-dollar deals that came later, not the railroad acquisitions, the moment he turned around and went home instead of going to Charlottesville. For several years he drilled. He made money. He lost money. He drilled again. Nothing about the early Anschutz story signals inevitable greatness. It was a grind, the kind of accumulation that most people abandon before it starts paying off. But in 1968, Philip Anschutz was 29 years old and working near Gillette, Wyoming when his crew hit something real. Oil, in volume, then the well caught fire. Picture this, a 29-year-old man sitting in the bar of the Casper, Wyoming airport, negotiating a deal with another wildcatter named Jeff Hawks over rounds of whiskey. While outside, 12 miles in the direction of Gillette, the sky has gone red. His oil well blew out. Burning oil is shooting hundreds of feet into the air. His rig has collapsed into scrap metal. His crew has been burned, and he is completely flat broke. He closed the deal anyway, scrawling the contract terms on a bar napkin. Then he loaded his men into a rented plane and banked toward Denver. As the plane turned, he looked out the window toward Gillette and saw the glow. He told an interviewer years later what ran through his mind in that moment. He thought it was the end. He thought he would never come back from it. He did not turn back. He landed in Denver, tracked down the legendary oil firefighter Red Adair in Houston, and asked him to fly to Wyoming and kill the blaze. One problem: Adair required cash up front. Anschutz had none, so he made one of the most creative financial moves in the history of the American oil industry. He called Universal Studios. Universal happened to be in production on a film about Red Adair's life, the John Wayne picture that became Hellfighters. Anschutz sold Universal the rights to film the real fire, with the real Adair fighting it in real time. Universal paid $100,000. Adair got paid, the well got capped, and Anschutz walked away from what should have destroyed him with his first $1 million. "There's always a point," he said, "that if you go forward, you win. Sometimes you win it all, and if you go back, you lose everything." That was that point for me. He went forward. By 1970, Anschutz had acquired the 250,000-acre Bauman Farms in Liberal, Kansas for $10 million. The following year, 1971, he picked up 9 million acres along the Utah-Wyoming border. 9 million acres. That is larger than the entire state of Maryland. He didn't know it at the time, but he had just purchased one of the most valuable pieces of privately held land in American history. In 1978, Amoco Corporation's geologists ran seismic surveys across the region and found a reservoir adjacent to Anschutz's property containing 1 billion barrels of oil. 1 billion barrels. The largest oil discovery in the continental United States since Prudhoe Bay in Alaska a decade earlier. Amoco immediately tried to buy Anschutz out. He refused. He started acquiring additional mineral leases across the entire formation instead. Then, in 1982, he sold Mobil Corporation a half interest in those mineral rights for $500 million. That single transaction, on land everyone had assumed was mostly good for grazing cattle, made him a billionaire. He sold it at exactly the right moment, too. Within a few years, the oil crash of the mid-1980s would have wiped him out. Instead, Philip Anschutz walked away holding one of the largest personal fortunes in the American West. For a period after that, he was the only billionaire in the entire state of Colorado. One man, one state. And outside the oil industry, nobody knew his name. Most men in his position would have stayed in oil, or bought something comfortable and retired. Anschutz looked at the landscape in the early 1980s and found something nobody else was paying attention to. Railroads. Not glamorous, not high growth, not the kind of investment any respectable hedge fund was putting on their pitch deck. Failing, debt-soaked American railroads that nobody wanted, but which owned enormous rights-of-way across the Mountain West. Legal corridors through terrain where it would be legally impossible to build anything new. That Anschutz understood that those corridors were worth more than the trains running through them. In 1984, he bought Rio Grande Industries, the holding company for the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad, for $90 million. Then in 1988, he acquired Southern Pacific, one of the iconic American rail names, for just under $1 billion. He spent years improving operations, sold the railroad's surplus land in California and Texas for approximately $2 billion, and reinvested that capital into new tracks and locomotives. But the real move was what he did with SP Telecom, a sleepy subsidiary of Southern Pacific that held the rights to run fiber optic cable along the railroad's existing rights-of-way. Anschutz separated it out and began building a telecommunications network through corridors that ran across the entire western United States, through mountains, across deserts, through places where nobody else had the legal right to lay a wire. In September 1996, he sold Southern Pacific to Union Pacific for $5.4 billion. He personally pocketed approximately $1.4 billion from an initial $90 million investment. Then he merged SP Telecom into a company called Quest Communications, brought in a former AT&T executive to run it, and took it public in 1997. By year-end, his 84% stake in Quest was worth $4.9 billion. When Quest then acquired US West, one of the original Baby Bells, in a $43.5 billion deal in 2000, Anschutz's diluted stake still represented roughly $12 billion on paper. At the peak of the dot-com era, Heir Philip Anschutz's net worth was estimated at nearly $18 billion. The man who had started by selling film rights to a burning oil well in Wyoming had quietly become one of the wealthiest people in the world, and almost nobody in the country knew his last name. The telecom money pulled back as the bubble collapsed and Quest ran into serious difficulties under Nakio's leadership. Anschutz stepped back, but by then he had already made his next pivot. He had gone into entertainment, and he had done it at a scale nobody anticipated. The vehicle was the Anschutz Entertainment Group, AEG. You have never heard those three letters unless you work in the music or sports business. But you have given AEG your money, repeatedly, probably without realizing it. Crypto.com Arena in Los Angeles, home of the Lakers and the Kings, AEG. The O2 Arena in London, one of the highest-grossing music venues on the planet. AEG Coachella Valley Music and Arts Festival, AEG. Over 70 arenas and concert venues spanning every major market in the world. AEG competes directly with Live Nation for dominance over global live entertainment. It is a company worth tens of billions of dollars, and most concert-goers have never once said its name. Add Regal Entertainment Group, the largest movie theater chain in the United States at its peak. Roughly 7,000 screens across the country operating under the Regal, Edwards, and United Artists brands, which Anschutz controlled for years. If you sat in a Regal theater at any point in the 2000s or 2010s, your ticket revenue was moving toward Denver. Add the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs, and one of the most historic resort properties in the American West, sitting on over 5,000 acres at the base of Cheyenne Mountain with its own private steam railway to the summit of Pikes Peak, and a guest list that includes 12 U.S. presidents dating back to Theodore Roosevelt. Add Xanterra Parks and Resorts, which manages hospitality operations at Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, and several other national parks, meaning that when American families take their once-in-a-decade national park vacation, they are often sleeping in an Anschutz-managed bed without knowing it. Add 6 Major League Soccer clubs including the LA Galaxy and Colorado Rapids. Anschutz co-founded the entire league in 1996 and remains its most powerful single owner. Add the Washington Examiner, the Colorado Gazette, and the Denver Gazette, making him the dominant force in Colorado print media and a significant voice in national conservative journalism. And the Eagle's Nest Ranch, 60 square miles of Colorado ranch land east of Greeley, acquired from the Coors family. That is 38,400 acres inside state lines, in addition to a 500-square-mile cattle operation in central Wyoming. In addition to Anschutz Exploration, which continues to manage oil and gas mineral rights and active development projects across the Mountain West, still generating royalty income from some of the same geological formations he bet on in the 1970s. Inside Colorado specifically, the Anschutz footprint reshapes the landscape in ways that most residents have never mapped. The medical campus bearing his name at the University of Colorado in Aurora, built after he and his wife Nancy donated over $100 million, now serves as the hub of a hospital network, treating hundreds of thousands of Coloradans every year. The 2 major newspapers in the state carry his editorial philosophy onto breakfast tables every morning. The Colorado Rapids play in a league he invented. The Broadmoor has shaped Colorado Springs' identity as a destination for over a century. And through Anschutz Exploration, mineral rights that trace back to the wildcatting era of the 1970s continue producing income from beneath the soil of the Rocky Mountain West. The Anschutz Corporation operates out of a building on 17th Street in downtown Denver with no exterior sign identifying what it is. 100 employees, entirely private. No quarterly earnings calls, no press releases, no public statements. Just a building where, behind closed doors, decisions get made about arenas in London, mineral rights in Wyoming, ranch land in Colorado, and media properties across the western United States. Fortune magazine compared him to J.P. Morgan in 1999. The comparison lands. Morgan integrated entire economic sectors in the Gilded Age across steel, railroads, and banking. Anschutz has done something similar across oil, railroads, telecom, entertainment, media, and hospitality, but with a lower profile, in an era of higher regulatory scrutiny, and in a way that makes the empire look like a scattered collection of unrelated investments rather than the unified structure it actually is. That is by design. His operating philosophy, distilled from the rare interviews he has given over 6 decades, comes down to this: find something undervalued, build it while nobody is watching, sell it at exactly the right moment, and deploy the capital into the next undervalued thing before anyone figures out the pattern. He has executed that strategy across 6 industries and 60 years. At 86 years old, as of 2026, he is still doing it. There is one dimension of this empire that does not show up in the financial coverage. Philip Anschutz is a deeply conservative Christian. His church is the Evangelical Presbyterian Church. His faith has shaped the business in ways that are not immediately obvious. The films his studio funds through Walden Media run toward family-friendly, values-oriented narratives. The Chronicles of Narnia franchise, produced with Disney, is the signature example. The newspapers he controls sit firmly on the right side of the American media landscape. His political donations over 40 years have gone almost exclusively to conservative causes and Republican candidates. His media properties represent the largest conservative editorial voice in Colorado, a state that has shifted meaningfully Democratic over the past 2 decades. Whether you find that admirable or troubling depends on where you stand. What is not in dispute is that it is deliberate, sustained, and operating at a scale most people in Colorado have never paused to consider. Here is the question the Anschutz story leaves unanswered. Philip Anschutz is 86 years old. The Anschutz Corporation is entirely private. There are no public succession disclosures, no announced transition plans, no visible infrastructure preparing for the day this empire needs a new architect. His 3 children have maintained the same studied privacy as their father. None of them have given interviews. None of them appear on corporate boards in ways that signal a grooming process. The operation stays behind the curtain, all the way down. Great American dynasties have navigated succession in very different ways. The Mars family built a governance structure so locked down that it has transferred between generations since the 1930s without a single public rupture. The Walton family created legal architecture around Walmart that kept the empire unified after Sam's death in 1992, eventually making the Walton heirs the wealthiest family in American history by collective net worth. The Anschutz approach has been different. Opacity so complete that even the question of succession planning cannot be answered from the outside. Private dynasties of this scale tend to go one of 3 directions when the founder exits. They get professionalized, management teams absorb the vision, outside capital flows in, and the founder's original instincts get gradually diluted into institutional convention. They get fractured. Heirs with different priorities divide the assets, and pieces worth billions together get sold off separately for less. Or they hold. Someone carries the founder's philosophy forward and keeps building. The Anschutz Corporation has remained private and intact through market crashes, industry disruptions, and 6 decades of American economic cycles. That is not an accident. It suggests a discipline that outlasts any single deal, but it has never been tested without Philip Anschutz at the top. The O2 Arena does not disappear when its owner changes. The Broadmoor is still there. The mineral rights on 10 million acres of Western land do not evaporate. What changes, if anything changes, is the philosophy behind how those assets get used, and whether whoever comes next has the patience, the creativity, and the specific appetite for invisibility that built this thing in the first place. Philip Anschutz did not build a $25 billion dynasty by being loud. He built it by moving faster than anyone who was watching, and by doing most of the work in rooms where nobody was watching at all. His grandfather Carl emigrated from Russia to Kansas and opened a bank. His father Fred drilled for oil in ground nobody else wanted to touch. Philip took that family instinct, the willingness to go where nobody is looking, to bet on something undervalued before the market figures it out, to outlast the skeptics, and compounded it across 6 decades into a structure worth more than most countries can claim. No press conferences, no yacht, no social media presence, a Timex on his wrist, a rented plane over Wyoming in 1968, banking away from a fire that should have finished him, catching one last look at the red glow over Gillette, and deciding to go forward anyway. That single decision is the reason Colorado's richest citizen is a name most Coloradans cannot say without looking it up. It is the reason there is no sign on the door of his building in Denver. And it is the reason Philip Anschutz is worth more than the GDP of Iceland, and why he would never, in any version of his life, want you to know it. Dynasties that last are not built loudly. They are built behind the mountains, out of sight, one undervalued asset at a time. Like and subscribe to Apex Status. And tell me in the comments, do you think the Anschutz empire holds together after he's gone, or does it get broken apart? Because that is the one bet this family has never placed in public. We are tracking the money,